Hello, I'm Mantastic'c and Fantastic, and today I'm going to be talking about the state of the game for June 2021. Fun fact, it was an article I've been working on for quite some time. I had to change the title from June to February just because things take time and I have this problem. Either way, I've been playing Pad for over 2,700 days. Actually, it's getting closer to 2,800 days. And in this lengthy time period, I've seen basically all the different metas of Pad, leaders rising and falling, farmables being significantly powerful and actually being top tier, with Miru being like the biggest outlier of all farmables, I feel, at this point in time. And as a whole, Pad is my longest played game and technically my longest relationship. Like, I do love Pancake and everything, but I've technically played Pad longer than I've known her, which is kind of an interesting tidbit. But I obviously love this game, but at the same time, like, there are certain aspects that I feel are a little bit problematic, and I want to take this time to address the things that I feel Pad is doing great and the areas that Pad could be doing better. As a whole, this is more of just like a conceptual, like, thinking piece, and hopefully it maybe sheds some light on some nuances that maybe you've been thinking about, and maybe you have similar thoughts to myself as well. So I have created another State of the Game article basically a year ago, and a lot of the stuff has remained reasonably similar, but I feel like I did expand a lot of areas. So, as a whole, Pad is a marathon, not a sprint. This can be said for any gacha game because of the way premium currency or magic stone acquisition is handled. Basically, there is only a finite number of dungeons you can clear for that first time clear bonus, and then eventually it will dry out. You just won't have anything else to necessarily play to acquire a magic stone, and as a result, the way to farm magic stones becomes logging in and doing gift dungeons, or even tackling the low-hanging fruits such as like the easier monthly quests, or like limited time events that are around for maybe a couple of days. Clear them once, get extra lucrative rewards. But basically the idea is the longer you've played the game, the more resources you've acquired over time, because I'm going to use the most extreme case that I can think of is Pertl, who is a Pad Twitch streamer. He is non-IAP, so doesn't spend any money in the game, and he has over 4,200 magic stones in his account last time I checked. Pretty cool feat overall, but basically it's just been because he seldom rolls and he's just been playing the game for such a long time, and as I mentioned, you acquire stuff from just logging in or doing the lowest hanging fruit. We are definitely showered with goodies, kind of an extension of the marathon concept. Basically, our login bonuses have become so much more lucrative compared to before. We are given countless amounts of magic stones. Even just this month alone, it's 28 stones per week. Can you imagine telling someone, like, say, who started playing Pad, like, 7-8 years ago, that you can get 28 magic stones every week for an entire month? They would look at you and say, shut the front door. No way. Because if you think about it, like, we got maybe like a couple of stones a month. It was kind of outrageous back in the day. So we're definitely being showered by wonderful goodies. We get tons of magic stones, we get lots of free rolls, lots of various events like free Godfest exclusives. Basically, we have so much nice things given to us, and at the same time, this has also lowered the need for grinding because we are given tons of pluses. I think the monthly quests are giving several thousand pluses now for just clearing even the basic levels, and before we struggled, or no, we did struggle, but we were happy back then getting 3+ eggs from Oceans of Heaven. Like, it's not, like, grinding has definitely taken on a new perspective with the current day Pad, and I definitely think that's a positive thing because banging your head sound like against your device for an entire day on Saturday when the drop rate bonus was higher just to get 2 or 3 pluses was considered a great achievement, and like it just changes the perspective, and like it wasn't necessarily that fun playing the same dungeon over and over again. So we definitely have much more variety because of all the goodies we are given. We also have stamina refills. This has been one of the best quality of life improvements for sure, because back in the day we had stamina refilling once every 10 minutes. You had to be incredibly picky with what you actually wanted to play back then. You could attempt maybe 1 or 2 dungeons and you're done for the day. Like, I remember when I was trying to skill up my Sakuya through like the 99 stamina, for Paradise of the Holy Beast, something along those lines. 99 stamina, you only made like 144 per day, I think. So like I would try it once, maybe 2 times in a day, maybe fail, hopefully clear it, and then I'm done. It was kind of silly. But now we get stamina at a rate of once every 3 minutes, so much faster. We also have the ability to watch an ad twice per day to refill our entire bar. So right now, I have basically 500 maximum stamina. I get 480 per day for just passively letting it regenerate, and I can get basically another 1,000 with my ad watching. Now, I can't chain rank ups as easily at rank 1,000 plus, but players who are like below rank 900 can chain rank ups with relative ease. So in theory, the Gung-Ho's recommendation that we limit our playtime to 1 hour is basically tossed out the window, because you could technically probably play an infinitely long time just from the standard refills and also the various zero stamina cost events Gung-Ho does give us. At the same time, there is no more early game in pad, because when you think about any other game, when you start a game, you have a certain amount of transition. You have to progress a certain amount in order to basically hit those end game content, which is usually the goal in most games. In pad, there's very little gatekeeping for actually acquiring good cards. In theory, the most recent Super Godfest, a brand new player could roll a Nautilus and roll a bunch of the subs for Nautilus. You can get Freyr, you can get Celica, you probably could find a Susano, just things that would help you transform reasonably fast. And then you have an endgame leader that can clear all content in the game, but you're someone who's brand new, who's basically trying to attempt dungeons from 7-8 years ago. It doesn't really make much sense. In other games, you have to grind and have a certain amount of progress before you can unlock these truly powerful cards. It's just there are resources that wouldn't be acquirable otherwise. But with pad, everything can be acquired basically instantly. And I definitely feel like this has erased the concept of having an early game. Basically, the vast majority of dungeons are already invalid because they're so old. If you think of all the normal dungeons, outside of True Training Arena 2, the highest one, almost every other one is basically a cakewalk. They're so many years old. Leaders nowadays, it's kind of like you go to a water gun fight and you end up bringing a giant hose attached to a fire hydrant. You're way stronger than everyone else with those dinky water pistols. That's kind of what it's like for early game pad. You're just given way better tools than are necessary. So it definitely will distort or skew players' perspectives, because you'll be like, wow, I'm just smashing through everything. And then you actually encounter things with mechanics and have no idea what they do, and you get sad and frustrated. And I feel like it's definitely a bit of a disconnect. There's no early game. Even mid game is a bit blurred at this point in time. But that's just kind of the consequences of having these lucrative Godfests, which is obviously great for more advanced players, and obviously it helps newer players because you're like, wow, I have all these cool stuff. Another great aspect of pad nowadays is story mode, because story mode dungeons actually function much like a tutorial. It actually will teach you the game, show you some mechanics. It takes away the team building aspect, which is actually quite a difficult thing overall in my opinion. But the idea is, with a story mode, you have some guidance for what you should be doing. The stamina cost is okay. You're at least able to clear the dungeon given the team that you were provided, which is definitely a pleasant aspect. And they give incredibly lucrative rewards. You can get 1,000 modules, which is excessive for someone who just started the game if you really think about it. But it's part of the meta that I'm going to talk about a little further in the article. You just need so many resources nowadays because there's such a high turnover rate for a good card at this point in time. Now, comparing the story mode dungeons to the normal and technical dungeons and the outdated tutorial, the story mode dungeons are infinitely superior. I would prefer it if the game just got rid of most of the normals and most of the technical dungeons, because they serve zero purpose at this point in time. Why are we playing a dungeon from 7-8 years ago that gives no actual rewards? We just have to go through it. It's a needless slog that doesn't feel meaningful at this point in time. Get rid of those, make more story modes. It's just a much better experience overall. One other notable aspect that I want to stress is that transforming is king. Transforming is a reasonably new mechanic. It's only a couple of years old, but it has quickly become the most dominant ideology for a monster, because when you think about it, the only true hurdle you have with transforming is having sufficient skill boosts. But once you bring enough skill boosts, and we have lots of different tools and tricks to bring effective skill boosts like haste or delays, you transform and you become an infinitely stronger card. Their active skills usually upgrade to an outrageously high level. They have a much better leader skill if that's relevant. They have better awakenings, way better stats. Everything is upgraded. They also lose the skill boost from their base form, because when they transform, skill boosts are removed. And skill boosts are quote-unquote dead awakenings if they are not, after you enter a dungeon, they have no value whatsoever, really. So transforming is really just the way to go. And if you think about it, most of the transforming cards have over-tuned active skills. Let's take Norza, for example. She makes 3 water, 3 hearts, and gives you an RCV and a movement time buff on a 2-turn cooldown. That's completely outrageous, and it's definitely a big part of why transforming is so strong, because you can create system style teams. Like many water teams may want to utilize, say, 2 Norzas, and you're always making water orbs, always making hearts, you always have that permanent RCV and permanent time buff. It just makes life so much easier, and because of that, transforming is almost always going to be found on a given team because they are just overtuned cards by comparison. And if we are given cards such as, say, Nezuko, who have skill boost and haste in their base form, and then they transform into something truly valuable, it just makes it so much easier to transform. I definitely can foresee a time where an entire team is just transforming cards because it's just the best thing possible. Because if transforming cards were not better compared to non-transforming cards, there'd be no reason to use them whatsoever. Like, why would you go through the skill boost hurdle if the result is not stronger? Gung-Ho has definitely dug themselves into a hole here, and I'm not quite sure how they can really dig themselves out necessarily, unless there's a massive meta shift that basically heavily punishes transforming cards, or maybe takes away assists, or something along those lines. Another notable problem I feel with Pad is that cards don't stay relevant as long, because of the fact that we are given excessive amounts of resources, and there is such a high frequency of new cards being released. Yes, new cards are exciting. It just gives you new toys to play with, new solutions to dungeons, and if dungeons are being released on a steady basis, new cards are usually released to kind of counteract those dungeons. But at the same time, older cards don't stay relevant as long, because if you think of, like, say, every 3-month window, if you look every 3 months in Pad, there's definitely a notable jump in terms of, like, what are the best cards possibly available. And that's just the way of the game. But at the same time, this turnover rate is incredibly fast. And it definitely, like, it plays into the whole mentality that cards are somewhat disposable, in the sense that, like, you invest in a card and then you can just drop them aside because something new came out and you can invest in them quite easily. But with that being said, weapon assists tend to last the longest. Like, think of Fagan Rai's weapon. It's still quite amazing, and it's one of the older weapon assists if you really think about it. And then subs tend to last a little bit longer, and leaders tend to be churned out the fastest, because all Gung-Ho has to do is increase the multipliers of someone, and suddenly that's a better leader. Another problematic aspect that I've found is that we are shifting away from the monster exchange system. The monster exchange system was one of the absolute best improvements to Pad, because it lets players trade in quote-unquote useless or aged, outdated cards and acquire something of value. Yes, the trading ratio is 4 or 5 to 1, which means you still need to roll quite a bit, because let's say hypothetically it's a 33% chance for a Godfest exclusive. You need 4 of them for a trade fodder. Well, you're going to spend 10 magic stones per roll. You need to roll a total of, on average, 12 times, so 120 stones to get that high rarity card. It's a guaranteed thing in that sense. Like, if you have enough trade fodder, you can acquire something, but there's still that cost of magic stones you had to spend to roll them. And as a whole, I feel like the system is quite well. Like, Gung-Ho can definitely balance the rate of magic stones being given out with the trade ratios, that sort of idea, but Gung-Ho is now starting to shift away from this beautiful system in favor of events such as, like, say, Demon Slayer or Monogatari, where you had to actually roll for the second highest tier rarity, which is where most of the good prizes were located. It's a bit of a frustrating aspect, but what's even worse are things like Mystics and Spectres, where the featured cards are lumped in with the regular rare machine. You're going to be slogging through terrible rolling rates, incredibly tiny odds of getting something of true value at the top, and no way to monster exchange for them. Yes, you could directly IAP for one of the top rarity cards, but even then, it's a gamble. It's a 1 in 3 chance. You don't even get what you paid for, and I think it's kind of a weird monetization scheme, and it's just, unfortunately, a byproduct of the gacha system. But I definitely dislike these types of setups because it makes rolling not so fun. Like, it's fun when rolling rates are reasonable, or at least the bottom rarity stuff is not absolute trash. Now, things I want to improve in Pad, like the points I talked about are kind of like the macro concepts that are kind of existing right now. These are things that I feel like would help the game out. And no, nothing is perfect for sure, and I feel like just because I've played for such a long time, invested so much time and resources into this, I am able to at least be a bit more perceptive of things that I feel could be improved. And the biggest drawback I feel at this point in time is too many cards. I definitely think it's a selling point for the game to say that we have thousands of different cards available to collect and acquire, but only a handful are actually truly relevant. Kind of a weird system overall, because, like, if you think about it, so many cards are just completely invalidated. They don't really serve much purpose. And definitely Farmables, I feel, have taken the biggest hit in those regards, because Farmables are playing a much smaller role in the game compared to, say, many years ago. It's just like they don't hold a candle compared to like the new top tier Godfest exclusives or collab cards. So this giant rolling pool and just giant pool of cards with only a few being truly viable is a bit of a problem, and it's definitely going to be probably one of the like foundations for other problems I feel in Pad, because Gung-Ho likes to release new cards because everyone loves new things, but when you release new cards, they have to be stronger than something prior in order to make motivation for them to roll. It's not necessarily going to be every time an event comes out, it's a big jump in power creep, but over like a course of, let's say, 3-4 month period, you will start to notice something, and because of this, things get cycled out. You don't necessarily get that attached to a given card because they tend to lose their value reasonably fast overall. And this kind of leads into like the next problem I feel Pad has, is that there's no truly meaningful way to improve existing cards. Like back then, if you were considered a pretty cool cat if you actually had a plus 297 leader, and then if they were max skilled, wow, you were just like out of this world. Like I remember when I got my Sakuya 297 and max skilled, I don't know how many years ago, it was one of my proudest Pad moments because it was so difficult to do so. And I actually got to use her for quite a prolonged period of time. It was quite wonderful. But at the same time, we've kind of lost that ability to truly invest in a card long term, because right now, discrediting the level 110 to 120 aspect, which is not that relevant for most people, going to 110 is reasonably easy. Getting something max skilled is easy. Filling them out with latents is easy. And after that, it's like, well, I fully invested a card, and what do I do with it? I'll use it for a couple of months, maybe even less, and then I just kind of put it aside because something new and better has come out, and we repeat this whole cycle. Yes, we do have much more ways to acquire resources, so it doesn't feel like much of a grind, but you don't necessarily get to have a card being truly relevant for that long of a time. And if we had ways to invest and make cards better, we could have a different kind of meta overall. So making a little bit of comparison to other games I have played. I used to play Fire Emblem Heroes. I stopped at some time ago because my wrist usage, I just need to just cut back on more things. But one thing that I liked about it was you could have a card or a character and you can invest duplicates into it to make it a plus 1 through 10. And at plus 10, they had significantly more stats and just made them a stronger card. It let older generation cards have some relevance and attempts to keep up with current or newer cards, and that'd be something that would be interesting to have. I don't think duplicates would necessarily be the best method for doing it, but some way to upgrade a card to make it a bit more meaningful, maybe to let it last a little longer, or just more meaningful ways to invest in a card. And I definitely feel that like the fact that we can't change our latents, can't change our super awakenings without destroying whatever previous investment we've made, and then gambling in the super awakening case, like you can't swap and interchange a card that easily. And I definitely feel that's a little bit problematic. But again, at the same time, maybe it's because Gung-Ho just likes the idea of high turnover rate, new cards, new excitement, new stuff, and just makes things easy enough to acquire that it's not too bad. You get something new, invest in it fully, play with it for a while, move on to the next thing. It's definitely just the way Pad is, but I definitely would like to have more ways to meaningfully upgrade my cards. And with level 120, it's technically a way to meaningfully upgrade a card, but even then, it's not that big of a thing overall. Like, the stat gains are quite minor. It is some stat gains, but it's relatively minor. It's not that magical. Yes, the newer latents, like, say, the double damage cap is definitely meaningful, but my point is, like, it's just really just one way to, like, upgrade a card. We don't really have that many exciting ways to do so. And at the same time, it's made in-game coins a terribly polarizing currency. If you're the vast majority of players probably should not be worrying about getting a card beyond level 110. Like, the gains are so tiny, and it probably won't make a difference unless you're playing through Shura 2 and then the future Shura 3 coming out. Maybe even Shura 2, you may not necessarily need it. It would help. But the point of the matter is the vast majority of players don't need this. So this process going from 110 to 120 requires 1 billion coins, which is kind of outrageous. It's tremendously high. But then aside from that, there's basically no other way to meaningfully spend your coins. So coins will have virtually no value for almost every player, and then obviously they have value for players who are pushing their cards beyond level 110, but there's not many ways to use coins. It would be nice if we had kind of like a mid-range usage for coins, something that say like costs 50 or 100 million, just ways to like spend them that are not just going from 110 to 111, and the stat gains are just tiny as well if you don't take advantage of the latency. So it's kind of a little bit of a weird place. In-game coins are just like either no real value, we're just given so many of them, or they're valuable but only valuable for a very narrow usage and very few of the player base. We can't swap our Super Awakenings and Latents with ease. Kind of a point I just mentioned beforehand, but there are many times where I have only one copy of a given card, and I would love to have a different Super Awakening on them, but to go through that roulette of like just 1 out of 5 chance would be kind of painful just to try something out, or even just having Latents change. Like sometimes I want, say, a Jammer Surge on someone, or other times I would rather be SDRs. I can't freely swap between those because if I want to put SDRs in, I have to get rid of the Jammer Surge and vice versa. It'd be nice if we've invested in a card, given the various latents, and we can kind of just swap between all the previously fused stuff. It would make life just much easier or just much nicer, because then it would definitely facilitate a bit more experimentation, because like, let's say I did have a Jammer Surge on, say, my Polone, which is definitely a useful thing to have for, say, like Shura 1, and you don't really need to worry about SDRs on her. But other dungeons, you might need SDRs to protect your active skill. And I only have one Polone, so I don't necessarily want to just waste that Jammer Surge. That's the idea, because she's just a great solution for Shura 1. Point of the matter is, it'd be nice to be able to swap between previously fused latents or already acquired Super Awakens. Just swap between them. You still have to pay the resources to get them, but we should be able to swap between them freely. Dungeons are becoming too mechanic heavy. When Pad first came out, dungeons were all like normal style. Basically, they had no mechanics. You go into a floor, nothing happens. You try and overcome the spawn. They hit reasonably hard. They could hit a bit harder based on what other mechanics or health thresholds, or maybe they don't even change their attack pattern. It was definitely a much simpler game. Of course, we can't have it so simple. Like, we need different stuff to keep it exciting, but I definitely feel that Gung Ho is again kind of backing themselves into a corner by making dungeons so incredibly mechanic heavy and not giving players any information about the dungeon whatsoever. They still believe that the trial and error method with no information is the way to go, but we now have to rely on third-party resources in order to actually tackle any dungeon, because it doesn't feel fun playing a puzzle when you don't even know what can happen. It'd be kind of akin to like having a jigsaw puzzle and you're told to assemble it, but you're not told that half of it, like maybe like say a quarter of the pieces are hidden away in a box in a different room. Kind of stupid if you think about it. You don't know what you don't even know what you need. You don't even have the required pieces. Like, point of the matter is, probably a bad metaphor or reference, but the point is, it's not a fun thing not knowing what can happen. And when dungeons are so heavily riddled with mechanics, it can be quite a frustrating experience. I guess luckily for myself, and maybe for you, ladies and gentlemen, if you utilize it, I have an Arenas, Coliseum, and World of Carnage mechanics checklist article. Basically, I go through the dungeon and tell you all the notable stuff you need to counter or bring. And this is for Alt Arena 4, not even the hardest dungeon in the game. And look how many things you need to bring to counter the dungeon. All the green check marks are things you really want to have. All the stuff here you want to have counters to. And then even in here you want to have counters to these floors as well. Kind of outrageous overall if you really think about it, and it does like it I don't know, like, it's just like the fact that we don't have the information in game, and like there's so many small weird things that you can die to doesn't feel fun. And at the same time, because there's no early game or really no tutorial, a lot of players may like blast through all the dungeons leading up to here, arrive here, let's say, or any other dungeon that's filled with mechanics, and be like, wow, this is so unfair. I didn't know this could happen. And you will die to many unfair things repeatedly happening over and over again if you don't remove all the various debuffs. Like, for instance, going from floor 8 to floor 9, they both have movement time debuffs. And if you didn't clear the debuff on floor 8, you get hit by a larger preemptive. It might catch you off guard and might do something horrible. It doesn't feel fun overall. And I guess one big thing I want to mention is that we should just show the enemy's next attack. I feel like just telling us what the opposing spawn will do on their next turn, given their current health threshold, will be a massive quality of life improvement. Like, I would love to know if they're going to hit me for too much damage that I will die, so I need to, like, either activate, like, utilizing active skills, proc my leader skill in a certain way, or I could even stall if they're not going to kill me. It'd be nice to know what can happen, because, again, we're playing a puzzle game with minimal information. We're basically playing blindfolded almost, because the only information we have is the turn timer, which is basically always going to be 1 nowadays. So just even a small quality of life change of telling us the next ability at the current health threshold. Sure, if you push the health threshold below, something else could happen. That's expected, but at least tell me if I can survive the next upcoming hit without trying to guess or pull out a ruler to try and figure out what percentage of health the boss is currently at. Just small, silly things like that I feel would make a big difference. And then I want to just give a little health update at the very end, so I'm going to say something. So, back, neck are still giving me problems. This past week, from Monday midday to basically most of Tuesday, partially Wednesday, I had an inability to really walk or stand. Quite frustrating and obviously very painful overall. This happens on a reoccurring basis. It's just a matter of me finding ways to work around it. My wrists have been quite painful. Like, I oftentimes wake up with sharp, searing pain in my wrists. I have avoided as much usage as possible. This article here, I started writing it in February. Obviously, I didn't work on it every single day, but it took me quite a bit of time to type all this out. And like it was a process for myself. It did, I guess, let me keep updating certain thoughts over time, but it's a painful thing. And like, I'm barely playing pad nowadays. I'm basically just kind of that person who's doing the login and do the low-hanging fruit style approach. Like, I'm not going to lose my progress because in theory I get the most progress from just logging in and doing the gift dungeons. So I'm barely playing pad just because I'm just trying to rest my wrists. Hopefully they do calm down. In, I guess, some other good news, I did receive my very first COVID vaccination a couple weeks ago. I'll get my second dose in a couple of months. Canada is just very slow and behind. But because I at least have one dosage, I'm feeling a little bit more confident and braver. I basically never leave the house almost whatsoever unless my mom takes me somewhere or it's a medical-based thing. And I'm going to be receiving a bunch of imaging for like my back, my neck, my wrists in the very near future, and I've managed to switch the hospital location because the hospital where I tend to receive most of my treatments is a little far away from myself. So hopefully I get a call back from Royal Columbia sometime soon, and I can get some imaging done and hopefully make some progress. But the various specialists that I have spoke to within at least the past month, both of them are advocating for more drugs, different drugs because they're different types of doctors, but like they just want to like load me up on various painkillers, which obviously has a large appeal. Like, I would love to just not feel the pain, but then my cognitive functioning might decline. But at the same time, I don't have much I can necessarily do in a given day. Like, I try reading books more often because like it doesn't use my wrists, but even holding a book hurts my wrists, and it's just kind of a silly thing overall. But with that being said, I try to at least remain positive. I'm trying to find ways to enjoy what time I have necessarily, like more productive time. Like, I definitely do feel that after I get to like say 12 p.m. or noon time frame, my functionality does definitely decrease. It's currently 11 a.m. right now. My neck and back are giving me tremendous amounts of pain. It's getting problematic, and I do take various medications, and I usually start taking the first dose around 12ish because that's when it starts becoming much more problematic. So I have a reasonably short window to do stuff, but I try and get as much done at the beginning of the day. Like, I woke up, I did my physio exercises, I went to the gym in my building. There's no one there, thankfully, and I just pedal on a stationary bike with a big backrest. I can do that for like maybe 20 minutes or so. It's not amazing, but it's at least a bit of mobility and then just stretching afterwards. But either way, hopefully I get some imaging done soon. I'm basically just trying to avoid movement as much as possible. I can basically kind of recount what I've done in pad for the past couple of weeks. Is like log in, do gift dungeons. I tried the ranking dungeon maybe like 4, 5, 6 attempts, and I just stopped because it was going to get too painful, I felt, and maybe a couple of swipes of AA2 and swiping when training Arena 2 is 0 stamp. But other than that, not too much. But again, like I said, pad is a marathon, not a sprint. This is just a little bit of a lull for myself, I like to think. And I'm still getting just as many magic stones as you, ladies and gentlemen, are because I'm logging in and doing my gift dungeons. So, in conclusion, pad is definitely one of the longest standing games in the market and by far my most played and longest played game of all time. It is still a tremendously fun thing, and even if like I feel that like I get a little burnt out or other problems arise, just taking a bit of a easier approach to like just logging in, doing the low-hanging fruit, at least keeps your progress level and you don't fall behind. Like, I at least have a pretty decent stash of magic stones, so if the next big event comes out and I'm interested in it, I could at least roll. I didn't lose progress there. So let me know what you think about pad in the comments below. I'm going to go on a limb and assume most of you love this game because you're probably watching this for that reason. But let me know what are the aspects that you feel like Gung Ho is doing great or areas you feel that they could improve. Either way, hopefully all the Mantastic day. I wish you all the best luck in your own pad adventures and happy puzzling.